I was thinking about this earlier today and I thought I'd share. Now, one thing that I have learned over the years is that growth does not make everybody happy. And in fact, sometimes growth makes people extremely uncomfortable. Now, when you're younger, a lot of us, we think that if we become healthier and stronger and wiser and we're confident and self-aware and we do all of these great things, everybody around us is going to celebrate us for achieving it. And that is just not how it works. That's just not the case. Sometimes the very thing that you're most proud of is the very thing that makes someone else extremely uncomfortable. And it's not because you're doing anything wrong. And I want to just pause right there and say, I used to be so excited about things that I had accomplished, and I was taught, don't get ahead of yourself. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that before, but that is a way of saying, don't celebrate yourself. Okay, so I just want to put a pin there. But you're not doing anything wrong when you're happy of your growth. But when you are happy, it's going to force other people to confront themselves. Okay? Think about this. When you stop people pleasing, suddenly people are going to start accusing you of changing. They may call it something else, acting funny or whatever. And when you stop over explaining yourself, they're going to think, oh, he or she is being distant or difficult. The same thing with rescuing people. When you stop, they're going to be disappointed in that. But because your growth forces people to confront themselves, what they're really trying to say is, we don't mind you growing. We just want you to remain convenient for me. And we don't want you to grow in a way that is going to challenge me to have to grow or do something differently or require me to examine myself or level up my relationships. We want everything to stay just the same, or we want you to stay small so we can feel big. But that's just not how growth works. Growth changes things and it changes people. It changes the conversations, it changes the relationships that you're in, it changes expectations that people have. It changes a lot. It changes who has access to you. People are gonna drop off, and it's gonna have to happen. I know for me, one of my biggest lessons was just realizing that the codependency recovery wasn't just about learning how to say no. It was about learning how to tolerate other people and their disappointment when the answer was no. Because those are two different things. It's not just learning how to say no. You got to realize you got to learn how to sit in that and be comfortable with it. You know, you got to be able to hold that boundary no matter how hard it gets. And when somebody doesn't like the boundary, that person is going to become upset with you, and you got to be able to stand firm and be like, okay, I got it. I'm not going to fall off on this, you know? And then the name calling, when they start calling you selfish because you're no longer overextending yourself. That's some real work right there. That's a lot of work. And here's something else that I've noticed. People often become attached to the versions of us that no longer exist. Those versions that always said yes and did what they wanted. And it never spoke up. It just accepted it or dealt with it, or just, we were quiet because we didn't want any confrontation. So we abandoned ourselves just to keep the peace and make everybody happy and just sulk in our own misery. And then when that version disappears, people experience it as a loss. And that grief could be anger on their end. Even though the healthier version of you is standing right in front of them, they don't want that because that doesn't feel good to them. Because growth changes the dynamic, you know? I've seen it happen in families. I've experienced it in my family. I'm experiencing it in my family. Let me just rephrase that. Same with friendships and in workplaces. The moment you start respecting yourself, the people who benefited, benefited from your lack of self-respect or just loose access, they become uncomfortable, but you got to tighten up. It's not your responsibility to fix things for them. You've got to tighten up. You've got to fix you. One of the most freezing realizations I had is understanding that not everybody is going to grow at the same pace. Some people are literally committed to becoming self-aware and committed to growing, and then there are people who's just committed to complacency and comfort. You know, some people want to examine themselves, and then there's the other people who just want to blame everybody else. Ooh, I got some stories about that. Some people are really interested in growth, and then some are just interested in whatever's familiar and easy, safe, and that's not growth. That's unhealthy. That's why you'll see sometimes that people defend behaviors that actually hurt them time and time again because it's familiar. It's just common to them. You'll see people remain in patterns that no longer serve them because it's familiar to them and it's safe. You know, you'll see people reject opportunities to grow because the growth requires uncertainty and to be uncomfortable, and they don't want to go through that. They don't want to have to learn to be accountable and go through self-examinations and require themselves to be honest with this and journaling and opening up. They don't want that. Honesty is never comfortable with people who are just pretending. I think that's one of the reasons so many people struggle with boundaries, because boundaries reveal things. It reveals who respects you, who doesn't respect you. They reveal who only like access to you and who supports your growth. You know, I will say that even in my workplace, I have, well, let me be cautious as I say this. I've experienced what it's like inserting boundaries to people who didn't, with people who I didn't insert boundaries with initially. And everything that I'm discussing with you, I experienced it. The gossip, the slander, the name calling, because they didn't understand. But I had to set the boundary. Otherwise, them having access to me just was not good. It was not a match. The interactions were just not aligned. And sometimes that just causes a strain. But if you're serious about who you want to be, it's necessary. The goal is not to keep everybody comfortable, including yourself. The goal is to become more aligned with who you actually are. And that is going to disappoint some people. It really is. It truly is. That's going to surprise a few because they're going to be like, oh, where did this come from? And then for some people, it's going to frustrate them because they can't manipulate and control you as they need to. Let them have their feelings. Let them feel all of that. That's not yours. That's theirs. Growth was never about managing everybody else's emotions. Growth is about becoming honest enough to stop abandoning yourself. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, that's information for you. That's something for you to be like, that's interesting. Pay attention to that. Observe that they don't like that you've changed. Not because you need to fight them or anything like that, but because you need to just see it. You know, you just need to realize, what was this relationship really rooted in? And that's worth knowing. Always remember, it's not rejection, it's alignment. I'm Coach Valerie, and I'll talk to you later.